welcome to the next session of the Devtoberfest. Session is called Classic ABAP to ABAP Cloud. My name is Marcel Hermanns and with me is Volker Drees. Both of us are from the team of the ABAP platform. And yeah, we will give you some insights how you can move from the classic ABAP world to ABAP Cloud. So this session is provided for developers who are very familiar with the classic.
Oh, go ahead.
This session is offered for classic ABAP developers who are familiar with all the terms we listed on the left with DynPro, DDIC, PBO, PAI, OpenSQL, but who are not so familiar yet with new technologies, with new terms and concepts like RAP, like ABAP Cloud, CDS, the core data services. And yeah, so people who are familiar with the new world already might be a little bit bored or might be interested how they can explain their colleagues how to move from the one world to the next. So we are not considering two technical aspects or how you can migrate code. It's more like how can you change your mind? How can you build up your knowledge to come from the classic ABAP world towards ABAP Cloud. So therefore, first of all, we're going to explain what is ABAP Cloud all about, why do we need it, and where is it relevant? And then we go into detail. What is now the difference compared to classic ABAP? And at the end, we will provide more information where you can see roadmaps and blogs and further documentation, stuff like that. So first of all, what is ABAP Cloud and why do we need it? So ABAP Cloud is basically the ABAP development model to build cloud-ready business apps, services, and extensions. And it comes with different deployment options. So it comes with Steampunk, SAP BTP ABAP environment, and also with SAP S/4HANA, the public and private cloud, but even on-premise. And it's now very important to understand that, of course, on-premise in the private cloud edition of S/4HANA, we can still use classic ABAP development. But in the new world, in the public cloud and in Steampunk, that means SAP ABAP, SAP BTP ABAP environment, only the ABAP Cloud development model is available. And in the on-premise and the world and in the private edition, we also offer the ABAP Cloud development model so that you have a chance to transfer your coding from the classic ABAP development model towards ABAP Cloud. So now ABAP Cloud is not completely new. The term is new, but what is important for us is that it summarizes and collects the different technologies and ideas we had in the last years. So first of all, 2012, we introduced ABAP development tools for Eclipse, ADT. After, of course, a lot of fundamental changes which happened with ABAP Objects, AUnit, and further things like the internet was introduced, not by SAP, but overall. So, and with 2015, SAP introduced SAP S/4HANA. And of course, it was very beneficial that the ABAP development model supports also the very important topics like SAP HANA, Fiori, the cloud, whatever that means, we will see that later, and also key user extensibility, where key users can do very easily and modification-free extensibility. And then 2018, we introduced Steampunk, the SAP BTP ABAP environment. In the past, we had the standalone NetWeaver, so we don't call it NetWeaver and not standalone, but here we have Steampunk, which is running in the cloud, but serves more or less for the same purpose. In this cloud, you can do modern ABAP development. And here we introduce new concepts like how can we create a cloud-ready ABAP extension on SAP BTP, and of course the ABAP RESTful Application Programming Model, short RAP, which covers transaction aspects of the programming model. And now with S/4HANA, the S/4HANA ABAP environment for S/4HANA public cloud and private cloud, we introduced embedded Steampunk. And with this, we offer now the same concepts which we have in Steampunk, also for the ERP implementation for extensions, which we can do on S/4HANA side as a customer part. So also cloud-ready ABAP extensions on SAP S/4HANA. And all this together forms now for us the ABAP Cloud. That means it's not only the collection of the innovations or new ideas in the last 10 years, but it's the collection of best practices in which all fits together, and where we have a promise that we can achieve here all the same qualities and make this cloud ready for you as developers want to use and might switch to ABAP Cloud in the future. And now, if you look a little bit more into detail, we can see that we can build different types of applications with ABAP Cloud. So we cover transactional and analytical applications, but also integration services. And if we come up with this ABAP Cloud map here, we see, based on the SAP HANA database, we can use our languages, ABAP, and the core data services. We see that later in the demo, CDS. And at the end, we create UI services like OData and INA services, which can be then consumed in a Fiori application or analytical client. And if we combine that towards classic ABAP, of course, it's a little bit different. But overall, we are coming from the database, we are using programming languages, and we are implementing a protocol. That, of course, doesn't change at all. But we are going more into the direction of a model-driven architecture, because with a model-driven architecture, we can really support all the important things we need to support in the cloud. And besides UI services, human to machine, we of course also support machine to machine integration. We support here in ABAP Cloud OData services for the communication events, business events, HTTP, RSV, and of course SQL for application and data integration. And after consuming or exposing integration services, we also want to consume such services. So what we need is some consumption APIs for OData and SOAP services, events, HTTP, and RSV. Of course, not all the protocols are relevant in all the use cases. This is just what we support. And depending on the use case, you choose either the one or the other protocol or technology. And of course, the ABAP always comes with a lot of end-to-end qualities, for example, reuse services and libraries. These are also part of ABAP Cloud, the output management for example, application jobs, workflow, and stuff like that. And also built-in qualities are provided, so which is very important in the cloud, like extensibility, end-to-end, cloud readiness, access management, business configuration, security aspects, all that which is very important for cloud applications. And of course, lifecycle management and tools are also beneficial in order to create applications. So now, but what does it mean on a very detailed level? So as an application developer, I know ABAP code, so what really does change by now? So if we see here, for example, ABAP code in a class, using ADT, there are already two things which are maybe not completely classic, ABAP OO and ADT, but I think for the purpose of showing you what changes in the syntax, it might be sufficient. So first of all, yes, we are using ADT, and we introduced a new language version, which is called ABAP Cloud for Cloud Development. And with this language version, we can natively, or we were able to natively integrate into our kernel and in our tools things which are allowed to be used because they are cloud ready, and things which should not be used. Things coming from the technology, but also things coming from the application space, from S/4HANA, for example. And as you can see here, for the selection of the database table Mara and is not allowed, and also calling the pop-up to confirm is not allowed, and you would get a syntax error in the cloud development. But on the other hand, the access to released content, so we release technologies and we release APIs and content from S/4HANA application development, this can be used, and of course we make then sure that this content, these technologies will have no day one impact. They will be upgrade stable, and these are proven technologies and proven content from a technology. And so now let's go into a comparison between classic ABAP and ABAP Cloud. So maybe first from the end user perspective, we all know the classic ALV So we have a selection screen. Then afterwards, the data is shown in a list report. And then we move forward towards how does it look like in Fiori. In Fiori, we have a very similar pattern. We have also a smart filter bar, this is called, where you can enter the filter, the selection criteria, and then we see the result in a list. And afterwards, we can then navigate from a list item towards the so-called object page. That means we can see the details of the individual instance. But showing that on a slide is quite boring. Therefore, Volker, would you mind to show that in real?
Yes, of course, Marcel. Thank you for the very good and very nice introduction. So also hello from my side. I'm Volker Drees from the ABAP platform, as Marcel has mentioned. Yeah, and I will show you now the little example that we have prepared. So it's taken from the well-known travel example that we use in the RAP environment. So people that have already worked with RAP here and there or have heard about it might have seen that before. It's the travel header table only. And yeah, as seen or shown in the screenshot before, we have created this little app more or less similar to what you have seen in the ALV, where you can fetch a list of travels. That away. So pressing the go button, that is the unfiltered list. And then as you know from selection screen, classical ABAP environment, you can do filtering, and the same is possible here as well. So we have this travel instances here, which each of them has a agency associated, and we can all do the filtering on the agency, for instance. Press the go button, and then of course we get the filtered list. We can do sorting if we want to make this kind of ascending sorted by the customer ID. And as Marcel has shown, we have the object page, in this case, just the header information is set. The general travel scenario comes with bookings and booking supplements, but for the sake of simplicity, we stick to the header table only. And yeah, with that, I think I hand back to Marcel.
Yes, thank you so much, Volker. So, of course, we saw now a Fiori application, and we can see that it basically works similar to the ALV. So we have the selection screen, the list, and then we can see maybe the details. But if we want to check this from a developer perspective, then we can see that in the developer perspective, if we are, for example, in the SE80, but same in the SE or similar in the SE24 or other transaction, we can open the development objects. We see them in the some kind of tree on the left-hand side, and then we can have an editor which shows the code or the form-based editor. And if we are moving now to ADT, it is very similar. So there is a small pop-up where we can select the name, or where we can enter the name of the other object we want to open, and then we can even get a small description which objects are there and what is the type of the object. So, for example, is it a program or whatever, or a class, something like that. And then in ADT we would see the same, very similar the details. And of course, ADT provides a lot more features. But of course, for us, it is now important to show you that if you want to start with ADT, we could apply the same pattern. And exactly also like last time, Volker, maybe could you please show it in the system?
Of course, I can. So first thing, starting ADT, that's just to demo this live, how that would look like after installing the Eclipse base version that you need, and then with the ABAP development tools add-on on top of it. That's how it will come as you have installed it. You can get insights into first tutorials. However, we will skip that, of course. And this is how you are welcomed by the ADT tooling when you have installed the ADT add-ons. So first thing, of course, you need to do or could do is to create your ABAP project. You also get some shortcut information when you want to connect to a system, as well as inside a system, as Marcel has shown, to open development objects. So let's connect to a box. We have prepared a little demo environment here, and I will connect quickly to my ABAP backend system and just use the information that is defaulted here. I'm using single sign-on, so I don't need to enter a password. And after the connection has been established, I'm connected to this demo box. So similar to SE80, I could browse my local objects. I could also add favorite packages. For instance, the example or the scenario that we have prepared for today's session is in a dedicated package. So I can add this dedicated package to my favorites, and then I can browse this and see all the elements and artifacts that are contained here. As shown by Marcel, there is also the option to press Ctrl-Shift-A, and of course on the Mac environment, the corresponding keys are Mac-related shown there. So as you can recognize, I'm on the Windows machine here. With Ctrl-Shift-A, you can then open a development artifact, and you have a search and filter functionality here. So for instance, let's search for the Hub 200 report, the classic one that we've seen before, and I can then select this, open it, and then if it loads, then I can see the details, and similar to SE80, I can start develop all the individual things that I want to do here. And with that, I think I move back to Marcel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Volker. And now let's do a little bit deep dive. So what are now the concrete differences? So what we do now with you is we switch now, or we come from the ABAP list viewer, the ALV, we go to the ALV with integrated data access. Maybe you haven't heard about that, but we will use this as well as an intermediate step. And then we go and move forward to the Fiori-based application, and we will see what are the differences. Why are we doing that? Because we are first going from the ALV to the ALV with integrated data access, because we want to change only how we access the data and not the UI technology. So therefore, what we know, what all of you know is in DEDIC, we can do modeling, and we can reuse the modeled artifacts across multiple applications. And of course, this modeling aspect, for example, also creating a DEDIC table, supports us also with field extensibility mechanism. So that means also here, we have some kind of modeling and reuse aspects, which we consider in application development. And if we create now a report, Volker will show that in some minutes, for the classic ALV, then the first thing we do is we start with the select options of the report, one of the most important things we would start. And then at we come up with a select statement, which selects the data from a database table. But we also need to consider the select options which were entered by the end user and consider them in the where clause. And of course, the select can be quite complex, because just in very rare cases, we would select the data from one DEDIC table or from one database table. We would select the data from multiple tables which are joined to each other. And then during our select and select statement, or maybe after the select statement in the loop, we would then perform the authority check. That means an explicit ABAP statement, and we would check if the current instance is allowed to be seen by the end user or not. And depending on the result, we provide this data then at the end to the ALV API. So for example, here, classic ABAP, classic list viewer call function, reuse alt split display. So the internal table resulting from the select statement and removing the data from the authority check is then forwarded. And we are using OpenSQL. It abstracts from the different database technologies with a common feature set, but also with a feature set which is available everywhere. That means also not the maximum of one database, but the common feature set and the manual authority check. So, and Volker, would you mind to show that also in ADT, what this looks like?
Of course. Thank you, Marcel. You have seen that I've opened this report already. So it's the classic ALV report. And as shown by Marcel and as has been introduced by him, the first thing that we see at the top more or less is the select options. So the filtering that is happening, or the filter options that you can specify as an end user with the DEDIC linkage. Then you get also the ability to show value hubs for the respective variables that you can specify here. Then we have a little get data form routine that does the data calculation. And after that, the ALV grid is being displayed. Yeah? So if we take a look at the fetching the data, as indicated by Marcel, it's typically not a single database table that you query, but it's typically a set of database tables that you join then your data together from, and with certain criteria where you also have then the apply the select options filtering and so on, with a certain ordering and so on. And inside this, in this case, we have just kind of commented this, but you could then apply the authority check, which then takes care to kind of throw away the data that you're not supposed to see. Yeah. So, but bottom line, you are fetching all the data, maybe several thousands or hundreds of thousands of records, and then only a subset is supposed to be seen by the end user. So you would throw a lot of stuff away. And as said, after the data has been fetched, then the reuse function here is used in order to display the result. And with that, I think I hand back to Marcel.
So thank you so much, Volker, for this extremely simplified example, of course. So we want to focus here on the technical aspects of this application. And because we want to compare it now to the ALF with integrated data access. This was introduced some years ago. And this is not part of ABAP Cloud, but it helps us a little bit to understand now how we can move into ABAP Cloud, because also here in the ALF with integrated data access, we are using the same DDIC artifacts, and we are able to use CDS views, so core data services, on top, and consume them in the ABAP list viewer. So what is now CDS core data services? CDS is now a new language, and this language we can, similar to DDIC views, we can define which columns of the table, of the underlying table of view, are relevant for this view here, which we newly define. So, but we can also define, for example, associations. So in the old world, we saw this in the OpenSQL statement, I always have to define the joins, and I have to really know which foreign key relationship is required where, and which fields are relevant for which foreign key relationship. But with CDS, we can define this just one time by an association, and here we also specify the join condition. And because this is a model-driven approach, extensibility is also very, very simple. So we can also add in an extension artifact new columns to be relevant for the CDS view. And CDS also offers the option to use annotations for adding further semantics. We'll come to that later, what that means. And what is also very cool is, but this is, I think, a principle of all views, we can also have a view layering. And this is important for us as a best practice, that we can separate the interface and the consumption layer. So the underlying CDS view might more represent the normalized model via the, while the consumption CDS view on top represents more the consumption specific view, including all the joins, denormalization, adding text attributes, and maybe also adding consumption specific labels and stuff like that. And then in the ALV with integrated data access, after we are adding the select options, we can provide the relevant select options, not the values, but a link to the select options itself, to the ALV, and use this factory, create for CDS view, provide the name of the CDS artifact, and then the ALV would do the data access by itself. So we even don't have to write a single line of OpenSQL, now ABAP SQL statement, because the ALV does this all out of the box. And we can do here a real-time query where all the different combinations of paging, filtering, sorting, text search is considered in the same statement. That means in the old world, I had to select the data, and hopefully I did a very good selection, not too small, that relevant data is missing, not too big, might be too slowly, and then providing the ETAB to the ALV, and then only the follow-up queries like filtering and sorting on this ETAB works. But in the new world, this is not required anymore. We are having a much better performance using HANA in memory technology, and all the different query options can go directly in, and I don't have to wait minutes. And if I go back to the selection screen, change the filter and go back to the list again, wait minutes again. So all this is done via one single statement. And yeah, OpenSQL and CDS were improved here. With OpenSQL, we have now also an extended feature set, highly optimized for HANA, and also supporting the CDS modeling capabilities, for example, the associations. So in ABAP SQL, I can follow the associations which I define in CDS. And what is also very cool is the ABAP CDS also offers now an introduction of the authority check. So I do not perform the authority check after I read all the data, because all this doesn't work with paging. How should you select data from the database if you don't know where really to start with an offset or with a limit from the database, because some of the items might be removed during the authority check. And therefore, what we do is also here a query push down. In the DCL, we create a link to the authority object, and then the framework, the OpenSQL, ABAP SQL runtime will take care to consider this also in the where clause during the data selection. And this also provides us modeling capabilities, reuse capabilities. I don't have to ensure that everywhere where I do a select on a table or on a view, I do the same authority check. It is automatically done. We just model it once and it's used everywhere. And yeah, of course, much better performance by doing that on the database and not later on in the ABAP. So I guess, Volker, time for the next demo.
Yeah, thank you, Marcel. So we'll jump back to the ADT, and yeah, we'll really show you the other report. So I'm gonna press this little button here, then I'm getting a link to the currently edited source, and then I can just refresh, and then I see the rest of the developments. And I can then just open the other one, the IDA-ALF that we've prepared for this example. And as mentioned by Marcel, it's very similar. So it comes with the select options. In this case, it even has a search string because the HANA query pushdown allows to do a kind of text search, which the old ALV was more or less not able to do, or you would need to have it kind of coded manually. After this selection screen, then the linkage to the CDS view is happening. In this case, it's our consumption view, the projection view that we've seen. Let me quickly show this to you. It is based on the underlying view. So we have created here two views. It's the base view that selects directly from the database table, which also has the join conditions reflected as associations, as you've seen in the coding previously, and as Marcel has explained to you. Yeah, so this one exactly selects from the database table and is used as a kind of a base view for this projection view. And the projection view, if we jump into this one, then we see, for instance, the denormalization of texts like the agency ID. It gets an agency name by following this association and then fetching the property, the value name. Similar, the customer with its name, but also for language dependent things that is possible, where a text table is then used, and with the addition localized, you are able to add the current language as a filtering so that the text is reflected as the in the logon language. And this set, this view stack is used as a source by putting it here into the IDA-ALF. Then the entire magic is more or less done by the ALF, and that would already be sufficient to display the entire ALV. So, of course, we have added a few more things, like being able to store the user settings and also have the kind of the selection handled in the way that the filter criteria is applied. So this you need to code, of course, otherwise the ALV could not know which of the select options that you have used is supposed to be used in the filtering, but that's it more or less. In addition, the text handling is done here, and then the ALV is already displayed. Sorry for that. Then the ALV is already displayed and can be used. We have also added a few buttons. I have not mentioned this before for the Fiori tool as well, or the Fiori app. We have implemented a little transactional behavior, but we will come to that very quickly. Let me launch the ALV. You can use it also via F8 inside the ADT, so it's no need that you jump back to the ADT. You have the search term, and then it's basically entirely the same. Let me use now this time search in order to run the ALV, the IDA-ALF, the integrated data access, and then we see here very similar or more or less identical to the Fiori application, our data. And with that, I hand back over Marcel.
Well, perfectly explained, Volker. Thank you so much. Yeah, so then let's maybe move forward and see, after understanding how the data access changes, what changes now with Fiori even on top. So here in the next slide, we can also see the ALV with integrated data access. Volker just explained on the left-hand side. And we move on with the Fiori list report and can see that, taking over control. Yes, so that the same query is also working on the right-hand side. So from a very technical perspective, even the same engine is running on top, under the hood, on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, and which selects then the data from the CDS view by using ABAP SQL. But what changes is now even on top. We come up with some model-driven architecture even further. So we know in DEDIC, we are already doing some kind of modeling. Now with CDS, we have a very powerful view building mechanism with DCL, associations, and then also annotations. But now how to expose such a CDS view in a new world to the user interface. And we do that at the end of the world via the so-called service binding, because we want to ensure that all your investments are safe for the future. So everything you do at the bottom can also be reused in other scenarios. So for example, the CDS view we define, like any database table, for example, in DEDIC, can be used in multiple scenarios. So for example, in Fiori with V2 and V4 services, but also in analytical environments, and also exposing that as your own SQL service, and maybe other protocols in future as well. And then the service binding, which says I am a service binding using OData V4 for a Fiori UI or for UI in general, would then refer to a service definition. And the service definition again belongs to the core data service domain and would include the scope, which should be exposed for this service. So in the ALV, we specified which CDS view should be used. In Fiori or in ABAP Cloud, this is more powerful. We can expose more than one CDS view because we can navigate also to lower levels. So from sales order to items to schedule line and things like that. And these CDS views would then be nominated in the service definition with aliasing. And of course, then the rest stays the same. So, and all this helps us, of course. We have one architecture blueprint for the different scenarios, which helps, of course, the understandability. And this architecture blueprint makes it also easier for you, because you don't have to think, how do I put everything together, which technologies to use, because this architecture blueprint is, of course, already part of our cloud. And it ensures the reuse and for further scenarios, and also ensures end-to-end extensibility. We can easily extend all this stack via a CDS element, which is propagated to the UI. We can add further transactional logic, as we can see later, and things like that. And we don't need technical glue code for implementing a protocol. This is all taken care by the development model ABAP Cloud Wrap, for example, in case of transactional applications. So, Volker, maybe time for a short demo?
Of course, yeah. So let me close this one here, and we'll jump now into this one. So yeah, what I've not mentioned before is the access control, the DCLs, the data control language that we used here to control the data. In this case, we've commented this just out for the demo purpose, but this is where you define basically your authorization for the entries that the user is supposed to see or not. And this is also done per CDS view. So you do that on the base layer that we used in this example, and then on the projection layer, you simply inherit from this one, and then this is applied. So this is true for both the scenarios, the IDA ALF and the Fiori application. What comes on top, as Marcel has nicely explained, is the artifacts that you need in order to expose your CDS view that you have built, the projection view, as a Fiori application. So first of all, you need a little metadata extension in order to specify the fields and the columns that you want to see on the list report, as well as on the object page. And with that, you then have the service definition. In this case, it's a very small one because we only expose a single entity, a single instance here, the travel instance. We give it an alias here. And this is a kind of starting point then for creating the service binding, which actually at the kind of latest point in time possible associates and assigns the exposure protocol to the what we have developed, the Fiori application so far. So this by this we can ensure that whenever there is a new protocol required, then we from the ABAP platform side can implement the respective adapters and the mapping towards the protocol, and you only select the protocol when you expose it as your own service. So for instance, I could also create a new service binding using, I will not do that now, we'll just simulate this with the OData v2 protocol if that is required. And in former times, you might remember that would have caused kind of a redesign or rebuild of the service, maybe if you have implemented your service via the Gateway Service Builder. And with this, the service binding is then created and published, and then you can use the built-in feature, which allows you to run the application as a preview. So there is no need that you build a Business Application Studio project, a Visual Studio Code project. You can do that, of course, but it's not needed and required. You can simply, based on the annotations that were designed and implemented here, you can run a preview, and with that easily see and verify if your application works and behaves as expected. So if I just mark it and click the preview button, then the browser opens and it's identical application that I've showed you in the beginning. When I press the go button, I get my results set. And that's it, basically. So we have seen it was very easy, kind of model-driven, no real line of code, unless except for the modeling of the CDS data model. With that, it was possible to expose such a list. Back to you, Marcel.
Yes, Volker, thank you so much. So we saw that, by using the same CDS view as we could do it in the ALV, we can create very quickly the first Fiori application, which of course needs some fine-tuning afterwards. But I mean, we are just helping to get started. We cannot replace all the documentation in just 60 minutes conference session, of course. So now what would be the next step after we consider the service definition and the service binding? The next question is, well, we talked about a model-driven architecture and not like a code-driven thing we did in the classic ALV, partly at least. So we saw in the IDA-ALV that we have, for example, the select options, which list the relevant columns to be shown in the selection screen. We see on the other hand which columns should be considered in the text search, in the fuzzy search. And last but not least, we have, for example, also value heads, which on the other hand are related to the data elements. But all of these are more or less related to the columns or to the elements of our application. And what changes now with the new programming model, the new development model, is that we change a little bit the ordering. So we want to add all this information more to the elements, so that we have the elements available in the CDS view. So they are nicely listed here. So and then we could, for example, enrich this data modeling by adding further semantics. And this we do in the backend, and we do it UI technology independent. So for example, we say, well, the agency ID should be shown in the UI as a selection field. And we say the travel ID, or the travel, maybe the description behind the traveling ID should be relevant for the default search, for the text search. And by adding this annotation within the CDS view, or sometimes by best practice, we put this UI annotation also in the so-called CDS metadata extension. So we extract this information to a very related artifact. We can then influence, on the one hand, the UI rendering, but we can also influence the runtime of this. So what is relevant for the text search? Which elements should be shown in the table, in the selection screen, or on the object page? And as I said, this is UI technology independent. So we all know Fiori is very helpful to address the modern look and feel, but we also know that UI technologies might change faster than a complete backend redesign will come. And therefore, it's important to us that maybe in the future, we would also be able, if there comes something completely new, that we would be able to make this completely new on the client only, and that all the information, all the investments in the back end are were a safe investment and can be reused by a generic player or a generated player on top. And the good thing about CDS and all this annotation is that this also supports multi-layering and extensibility. We have a very rich feature set. And for example, for these UI related stuff, how this is reflected in Fiori, end of last year, we came up with the Fiori feature showcase app. And I think, Volker, this is really worth to show it also here in this conference.
Exactly. Thank you, Marcel. So what I will show is the blog about the Fiori Feature Showcase app. The app itself and the blog has been written and implemented by our colleague Jessie, and she did a very great job in alignment with also the CAP colleagues. They have a similar application available, and the purpose of the Fiori Feature Showcase app is exactly what Marcel has mentioned. It's a pure technical app, so it has absolutely no business meaning. It's a pure technical app to indicate and showcase all the UI capabilities and the possibilities, like little icons, like little bar charts, like this kind of rating indicator, and all these things, drop-down boxes and everything. And this is very, very helpful, and many people have already liked this application because, it is not just showing this as the app, but also comes with a linked wiki page where all the details are explained. And via a little hashtag, you can then search for the respective information and then find code snippets and implementation examples how to implement the corresponding features. So for all of you that might have wondered how to build and implement, let's say, a little drop-down box or a little rating indicator, by this app you easily come to know and get to know how to do that and how to implement that. And with that, back to Marcel.
Yes, thank you so much, Volker. And I like this app also a lot because it shows you all the cool stuff which you could create more from an end user perspective. And then you can really deep dive into the documentation, maybe even to see a code snippet you can copy into your application, and then it runs afterwards. Thank you, Volker, for introducing that so much. So the next topic would be, what about transactional aspects? So, for example, Volker just mentioned it also. We have in the ABAP list, in the ABAP list viewer, 2 buttons to accept or to reject a sales order. And we can add this to the menu bar of the ALV with the corresponding text and an icon. And in the ABAP code, we can react on these user commands, as it is called for the ALV. Or, of course, in classic DynPro programming, where you directly do PAI, of course, also asking for the OK code in your PAI coding. And typically, you call here some kind of update task function module to perform the changes. And then in the ALV, you maybe also need to do something more because the internal table needs to be updated and so on and so forth. And in the new world, we don't have this internal table available. We directly are working on the database. And therefore, what we are following here is, again, the model-driven architecture. And we have the behavior definition available. And this behavior definition defines the behavior for an entity which is represented by such a CDS view. So, for example, we have CDS views for sales order, for items, and for schedule line. And we can now attach a behavior to this CDS artifact, to the business object. And then we have one behavior definition, one artifact, one source code artifact, which is related to these business object CDS views. So to all 3, sales order, item, and schedule. And here we are also following this declarative approach. And we have implementation hooks available where we can then implement this behavior. So, for example, actions, the accept, reject action, but which is not part of today's presentation. For example, also create, update, delete behavior as standard operations which are available in the business object. And of course, we also can here do some kind of service-specific projection on top, because not all actions are defined in my normalized, completely reusable business object for multiple scenarios. I want also here to project the behavior. So in the one application, maybe create an update is allowed for, a person sitting in front of the computer and maybe entering all the data, but maybe for a manager who just wants to see an overview and just wants to accept and decline something, just one action and no create an update is relevant. So therefore also the behavior should be projected, at least from a best practice from our side. And after the definition of this behavior, logic of this behavior, we also need to implement that. As I said, implementation hooks available. And now the good thing is that we integrated this concept completely into the kernel and into the tools and everywhere. So because now we have implementation hooks which are completely typed. So as you can see here, we would have methods for modify, importing keys for action, travel, accept travel. So that means the header of the method is well defined. And as you can see here also in the help, we can see that there are typed types available, very specific for the scenario, derived from the CDS view, automatically created by ABAP. And this, of course, helps us a lot to reduce the chance of errors, which we can detect now at design time and not at runtime, because we don't have a typed interface. And the third thing, which is related to ABAP, so after the definition and the implementation, is of course the consumption. Because as soon as I use the behavior definition for the description of my behavior to these related CDS views, I can also touch this behavior via the so-called entity manipulation language. So it's completely standardized, ABAP integrated, and again typed. And for example, if we are looking to the released APIs from S/4HANA side for embedded steampunk for public cloud and private cloud, then we can see that all the different business objects, purchase order, sales order, they can be then consumed for the transaction aspects via this language. So for example, modify entities of travel, execute, reject travel, I provide the keys and I get back the result. Was it successful or not? And what are the messages related to that? And this language, somehow the concept is similar to OpenSQL, because I model DDIC tables, DDIC CDS views. I can use OpenSQL or later then ABAP SQL with CDS. This is very similar now to BDEF, behavior definition, and to the entity manipulation language. And Volker, maybe then quickly we could have a small demo on this actions as well.
Of course, yeah, very quickly. So showing the development artifact that you just introduced. As mentioned, so this is this so-called behavior definition, the base behavior definition, where we say that this is a so-called managed implementation, so that the framework takes over all the reading and logging and everything, and you can focus on the actual implementation. Yeah? So it's does not offer create, update, delete, but only an internal update, because we want to internally update the status, and therefore this needs to be enabled here. And via the so-called forward navigation, so like F2 in the old world, or double click, you can also navigate into the implementation by this forward navigation. Then we see that in the behavior implementation, how this has been implemented. So in this case, the accept travel action that we expose into the UI is then doing a modification on the overall status field, and is setting this one with the current new value. And it's reading also the result in order to fulfill the contract, in the sense that it results that the result returns the actual instance. And with that, we are basically done with this implementation. Then similarly, as the projection happens for the CDS definition, this is done for the behavior definition as well, in a little projection where we then basically say, okay, this is what we want to project, in this case, our both actions. And when we jump back to the UI, then we see that these actions are actually there. So we have the old selection that we had from before, and I can just mark, let's say, these two lines. You see the status is set to open, and if I now click on accept travel, then both are set to accepted, and this was executing the logic that we've seen in the backend. And with that, quickly back to Marcel.
Well, thank you, Volker. Perfectly introduced. So the EML helps us here also to test these actions in a unit test, for example. But it's very easy to add these actions, again, UI technology independent. They can be exposed Fiori application, they can be consumed by EML, and or I can create another OData service for web API consumption integration purposes. And this works there as well. And I don't even have to implement the technical coding for that. So this all we do because we think it's so valuable to implement this business logic that there should be so much reuse possible without adding further, a lot of effort in addition. So, and then we are at the end of the demo part and going to the next slide to summarize all that, what we discussed. So what we want to give you as a key message is that with ABAP Cloud, we have a development model for cloud-ready applications, services, and extensions. And it provides this architecture blueprint. And following this architecture blueprint helps a lot because it's applied to also various protocols. And it makes sure we are cloud-ready and it can achieve all the development and cloud qualities. And of course, it saves our investments for the futures and reduces the need of technical coding and implementation efforts. We could also say our cloud development model manifests SAP's best practices from a lot of years of experience which we have here on this. And of course, it's not a complete new innovation. It's just that we say, well, this is part and this is not of our cloud, but it's also used in-house. For example, of course, S/4HANA is also using all our new technologies. And with Steampunk and with embedded Steampunk, also customers are using that since quite a while, and therefore, it's well tested. Of course, we have also gaps which we need to fill, but at the end of the day, we are in a situation that it can be used. It's mass adoption ready. It's worth to check this out and to try it out. But where can you find more information? So my last slide. So there's information available in the community. There are several blogs available, but there's also the ABAP Cloud roadmap available. And I guess you get the slides later on to have a follow-up on these different links here. The ABAP Cloud roadmap also provides for us now the possibility that we can explain to you what will come in the future, not only for one specific topic like ABAP or like CDS, like what's new in security, but you can give you a complete update following the ABAP Cloud map, which we saw at the beginning. What is new in UI integrations and UI services? What's new in integration services? And always covering the end-to-end story. And that's very important for us that we are now able to do that and see this complete end-to-end. Having said that, I want to say thank you to all of you for listening to us. This session was focused on the read-only part. We will have also, we will also have follow-ups, maybe not in this conference, but somewhere else for the transactional parts. And I guess we can then move on to the Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. And then I think, Mamike, have you already copied things to the chat?
Okay, yes. So first question is, do we have any demo web application like travel in a cloud system, just like something else, just like a BC application? Volker, I think this topic goes to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the RAP documentation, then we have very prominently linked our sample repository. So it does not come out of the box when you install a S/4HANA system, or if you book a BTP ABAP environment system, but you actively install it, and it comes as a GitHub repository, and you can download and install it, and then activate it, and then you have same functional scope. It's as we've seen today. It comes with a draft-enabled application, introduces a 3-tier BO with travel bookings and booking supplements. So it comes with 3 entities, and with that you can easily see how such a RAP application is built end to end. Also, the documentation covers it in a demo, in a development guide style. So it's an end to end dev guide. and step by step you are introduced into it.
Great, thank you so much. Well answered. The next question is the ALV with integrated data access considering clean core? So we are using here the ALV with integrated data access to maybe first explain that we need to change something, how we consume the database and how the queries are executed. And then, of course, if at the end of the day, if it goes to Fiori, the ALV does not play any role anymore. Does it follow? Is it part of ABAP Cloud? Definitely not. But I mean, if I would be now some kind of developer, architect, project lead, whatever, in a classic on-premise world, it might be worth to think about to come maybe from the ALV to go through to the ALV on HANA, with integrated data access by using the CDS view. Because if you invest into CDS, you are already part of the new world. And you don't have to completely change everything, but maybe you can internally prepare how the data is consumed and the CDS views, which can then be maybe later be exposed to Fiori or somewhere else, or you can do that then in addition. But you can still make sure that everything is the same in a consistent way and that you don't have to select on the one hand and the CDS view on the other hand. That's one thing. And yeah, so I would not say that ALV with integrated data access is now a strategic positioning for us, considering clean core, but it might be worth to have a two-step approach. And the next question is, why the ABAP repository objects generator only allows OData before? That's a good question. So for us, I
can take it if you want, or you can also.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I think it's kind of not a kind of high-end reason behind it. It's quite simple. So because when you run the generator, you run it on a database table, and the database table could either have a UUID key or it could also have a technical or kind of a semantic key. Yeah, and the semantic key would require that when you create a new instance, that a little pop-up is shown in the UI asking for that little ID. And OData or Fiori Elements v2 currently does not support to show such a little pop-up, and therefore we have kind of as a default limited to v4, so which is capable of showing that little pop-up. And as you know, it's easily possible. I have also demonstrated it in the course of this session here. How easily you can do a right-click on the service definition and then create your own service binding with v2 in case you have the proper exit implemented of the key handling, or if it's a UUID, then it would anyway work out of the box. So there is kind of no super duper special reason behind it, but it's, yeah, anyway, it's very easily doable manually. If you want to edit a v2 binding, then you can do that yourself.
Yes, and this might also be a good option. Thank you, Volker, to say that we are investing further into this generation approach. So maybe if you watch the session, the other session from Volker and my side, beginning of October, which is related to Hello ABAP Cloud, you will see a bigger update, maybe not delivered, but maybe as a lab preview what will come in the future, and there definitely the generators will also be part. So two more questions. One is very interesting. Can I say that SAP Fiori CDS is always the recommended approach to develop reports instead of ALV with integrated data access? Volker, what would you answer?
I mean, of course, from a RAP programming model, we of course would recommend to go for a Fiori application, since browser-based and cloud-ready. I think that speaks more or less for itself. However, you still could go for the classical report EDA as we have shown today. So especially in the on-premise style deployments, so also private cloud edition, as you know. This works and will also continue to work. But if you are in the cloud environment, like in the BTP environment, then of course you cannot make use of any GUI-based things and artifacts. So therefore, in the cloud, it's the only option that you go for Fiori. And of course, it makes sense to kind of make yourself familiar with the latest and greatest development model. And therefore, we would recommend to go for Fiori application, of course.
Yes. So from a technology point of view, of course, yes. But of course, it highly depends on the nature of your project. So I think there is a wiki page, not a wiki, yeah, in a community or blog post, which is called The Evolution of the ABAP RESTful Application Programming Model. And here we also explain, does it make sense in which situations and not? So just as an example, if you have thousands of Fiori applications and nobody wants to push forward the Fiori world, then as an application developer, of course, it doesn't make sense to invest into in one new Fiori application if there is no strategy and roadmap behind that. But on the other hand, we all have to make sure, of course, we all know that going into the direction of ABAP Cloud is not a question of if we should do that. It's just a question or a matter of when to do it. And therefore, there must be a reasonable roadmap, reasonable steps, milestones, and when to do what. And maybe the ALB, integrated data access, can be used as an intermediate step if it is reasonable for your project or not. But in the target picture, of course, in ABAP Cloud, it is Fiori. So Fiori is the one and only UI technology in ABAP Cloud. And SAP is moving more and more into this direction. We are adding more and more very, very nice features to Fiori, as you would also see in the other ABAP Cloud session by Andre Fischer. And yeah, so I guess this explains the question a little bit, or the answer. So last question is, can we create inventory counting app using RAP? So I don't know. This depends now on several aspects. So who owns all this content? Are we talking about a public-private S/4HANA cloud setup? But in principle, you can create a lot of different apps using RAP, transactional applications, read-only applications by using RAP. RAP as covering the transactional aspects. So the parts of the transactional programming model in ABAP Cloud. But I don't know in detail what is now the context here. So 100%, I cannot provide an answer. So yeah, as I said, there will be a second session, or there will be two further sessions. Andre Fischer with an update of ABAP Cloud, which new features are in, and also Hello ABAP Cloud. And maybe if you are a classic ABAP developer or not, Hello ABAP Cloud is interesting for everyone, because we will explain how we will support the different personas, how we will support an expert who has already experience with RAP, with ABAP Cloud, how we will improve the development efficiency, but also how we can improve the classic developer, so maybe you guys, how we can improve the development efficiency for you, not only on slides, but really in the system, improving the tools. And the same also for newbies coming from the university, knowing maybe Java, JavaScript. What can we do here to simplify the access to the new world in the tools, in our concepts and technologies? So, Volker, I guess we are through, right?
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah. So, yeah, again, thank you everybody for attending this session, for listening to us. I hope it was bit interesting, and yeah, with that I think we can close the session, right, Marcel? Final words from you.
Thank you so much, and yeah, see you in the next session. Bye bye.
See you. Bye bye.